Hello and welcome to The Quest on Rajya Sabha TV. I'm Rakhi Bakshi, your host. The Quest is all about understanding people. The show gives you an insight into the life and career of a leading personality. And today on our show is a special guest. He's a man with many sides, the youngest member of parliament that Mumbai sent to current Lok Sabha. We are talking about Milind Deora, the Minister of State for Information Technology and Communications, and he's also handling additional charge of shipping. Welcome to the show, Mr. Deora.
Thank you.
But let me begin with your childhood, first of all. You're known as your father's son. Mr. Milind Deora has been a veteran Congress leader, also a former minister in the government of India. Was it easy for you to get into politics?
Well, you know, the issue of dynastic politics is very prevalent in India, and my view has always been that when I contested my first election in 2004, and I got a ticket to contest at the age of 27, I've never hidden from the fact that I got that opportunity because I belong to a political family. But at the same time, when you have a legacy in politics, the expectations from you also increase. So in some ways, it's a bittersweet thing to have a background. It gets your foot into the door, but then you have to prove yourself that much harder.
But you went to Boston University. Wasn't it tempting enough to stay there, or do you think that the hurly-burly of politics really called you here?
It never really called me back. When I was studying there, I finished my bachelor's in business administration. Then I worked in the US for a while. Even when I came back, I was never really interested in mainstream politics, in party politics or mainstream, even developmental politics. I had come back and I was living in Mumbai, and because my family has represented South Mumbai in Parliament for many decades, I got involved with some social activities, some charities in South Mumbai. And as I got deeper and deeper with these charities, I began to realize that the perception I had even of a constituency like South Mumbai, which someone would say is, you know, a very wealthy constituency in India, and it probably is relative to other parliamentary constituencies. But even in a constituency like South Mumbai, there were schools which could not afford computers for computer literacy. Children could not afford to buy uniforms. Children could not afford to pay school fees. Teachers wouldn't get their salaries from the government in time. So I was actually quite surprised by that, and I took it upon myself that I'd like to create an opportunity in the area of e-literacy and computer literacy. And that gradually got me interested in developmental politics, and from there it got me interested in organizational politics. So I think the way I look at it and the way I've seen my counterparts in India is people have entered this profession from two routes really. It's either from a developmental route or from a political activist route. And I think I entered it from the former.
But coming from a constituency like Mumbai South, do you think it's been a little difficult to connect to the rural population? Somebody would perceive you as a modern, savvy, young politician, or a politician now who's really taking charge in a big way. Is it difficult? Because there is this large rural population in India. Do you think it's becoming, it has been difficult for you to handle that?
Not really, you know, because South Mumbai actually has, it has a very diverse set of constituents. I mean, it has some of the wealthiest Indians in the world, and at the same time, wealthiest people in the world rather, and at the same time it has, you know, the epitome of the urban poor in India. People living in slums, people living still in the chawl system, in the rent-controlled buildings. And even in rural areas, when I travel for either of my two ministries, I really find that a lot has changed in India. And today, for example, the internet, which comes under my ministry in the Department of Electronics and IT, we have about 140 million active internet users. Now, not all of them come from urban areas, they also come from rural areas. We have a teledensity rate of almost 891 million wireless phones in the country. In rural areas, we have about 40% teledensity. So it's not that rural India is not connected anymore to the rest of the country and even to the world. So in that sense, I think rural
you also plan to put India in this global IT hub, and you're quite satisfied with the figures that are coming up for India becoming a real IT hub in the global arena?
Well, I think we've done well in the IT sector, but in the area of connectivity, the IT sector in India did very well because there was a labor opportunity. we could provide services to Western companies at a cheaper cost than what their local employees could provide. It was to some extent, but it wasn't entirely based on the infrastructure in terms of telecommunications infrastructure. What we're trying to do now is we're trying to build that telecommunications infrastructure and take it to rural areas, and take it to parts of rural areas where the private sector or even the public sector will not find viable in terms of techno-commercial feasibility. So we as government are encouraging investments in telecommunication infrastructure in those areas. Because coming back to my earlier point, I don't think that youth anywhere in India, whether it's urban or rural, people who have access to a mobile phone, people who can have access to a fairly reliable high-speed internet connection every day, they are of the same mindset as a young person living in America, for example. But we have to still ensure that there is still a large section of people, especially in rural areas, who are falling behind because of a lack of infrastructure. So what we in our ministry are doing is we are directing a lot of resources to those areas so that no Indian gets left behind. And in fact, unlike the voice revolution, which has largely been urban-centric, we want the data revolution, which I believe is the next revolution in this world, to be driven and led by rural areas.
You think social media, of course, is something that you are quite personally active at, and what I understand and hear is that you have a great fan following there. Do you think it really has this vast framework that it caters to?
Well, in India it's growing. Social media is, as I said, we have 140 million Indians, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, we have about 12 million active users on just Twitter, which is one social medium. But I think social media is the future of communications. And whether it's communicating with your friends, whether it's communicating as a politician to your constituents, as a business to your customers or shareholders, as even a journalist to your viewers, I firmly believe that internet-based platforms, and social media is one of those internet-based platforms, is the future of communications, in not just in India, but in the entire world.
Do you think that's enough? Or, you know, in the recent cases, like we're talking about this Delhi girl and all these rape cases that are happening, and other social incidents which happen, people expect politicians like you, especially younger, to come out and really connect to them. Do you think it's enough to only connect through technology, or you think that you have to be rooted or connected through the ground also?
Well, it's a good question, and I think from the profession that I come from, in politics, you can't really only depend on a virtual communication strategy. People want to see a politician, a person who they've elected to office, empowered. They want to see that person physically before them. But I think what's important is it's not an either-or strategy. You have to do both together. You have to have a physical presence. So I think politically in India, a politician 5 or 10 years from now will continue to have sabhas and programs in villages and cities. But at the same time, they can't ignore the growing number of people who want to communicate only via the internet. You have to do both.
So do you think otherwise, because tweeting, for example, many politicians are now active, but sometimes we've seen it lands in problems also. Do you think otherwise, or do you agree with me or disagree with me?
Well, it depends what you tweet really. It's the content. It's not the platform really. Social media to me is no different from giving a speech in a public area. It's the same thing. They're just two different mediums.
What would you say about 66A?
Well, I think 66A is, of course, it's a law that we administer in our ministry, and it comes under the IT Act. It's a part of the IT Act.
It's being argued, so a lot of viewpoints coming in.
Well, I think that what people tend to say in the public domain is that 66A to some extent should be amended. I don't think there's anybody who says you should not have laws for the internet, because as I said, I don't draw a distinction between if there's a politician who makes a hateful speech online, says something hateful online that can cause a riot or law and order problems, and says it offline in a public speech, both should be taken as seriously. Both can cause as much harm. In fact, one would argue that the internet can cause more harm, because you can retweet it, you can resend it, you can alter it, you can do so many things. It stays in that medium for a longer time. You make a public speech, nobody films it, it goes away, it dissipates. So therefore, you have to have similar provisions and similar laws that govern the offline space in the online space. But having said that, we had cases in the government of India where 66A was being misused by state governments. We completely accept that. and we are trying to find ways to, plug those loopholes so that people do not misuse that. And one big step we've taken after the Palghar incident outside Mumbai, we have basically now made it much more difficult for a local police station to file a 66A related case on an individual. It has to be escalated to the level of an SP, DSP, IG officer. So we believe that those things will prevent the misuse of 66A. But I entirely believe, and through your medium also, I would tell people who use the internet that in the Ministry of Communications and IT, I want younger people like myself to use the internet freely, fairly, without fear. They shouldn't feel afraid that somebody is looking at them, watching their tweets. They should enjoy it, have fun with it, share their pictures, communicate with one another. But just the way they would behave offline, the way they behave responsibly offline, we have to create provisions that they behave equally responsibly online.
We are talking to Mr. Milind Deora, and we can tell you that it's going to be more interesting talking to him because the man has many shades to his personality. But we'll come back to you after a very short break. Welcome back to the show. We have all known Mr. Milind Deora to be a politician and now a minister who is handling the ministry with a lot of capabilities. But let's look at some surprises that we have for you, and the man that always gives you some surprises. We know that you are a guitarist of repute, an accomplished man at that.
I'd like to think so. I don't know if I'm accomplished, but I play as a hobby. I don't get to play as often as I'd like to, but I don't really consider myself a very good musician. And when I was studying in the US, I remember there was a college near where I studied called Berklee College of Music, which still is one of the best musical colleges in the world. And when I got there, I remember thinking I'm a very good guitar player because I was young and I was a bit foolish in a sense. But as I met musicians who were studying there, I began to realize that I'm actually not that good. So I don't consider myself a serious musician. I do it for the sake of a hobby. I can't make a vocation out of it. But a part of me wishes I could play much more.
But cinema is what is around you actually. And what I was reading somewhere that your first film was Superman that you saw. And you saw a film along with your brother Mukul Deora and he cried. So how cinema has influenced you? You're married to Pooja Shetty, who's also into filmmaking.
Well, I don't think I'm a huge movie buff as much as I'm a music buff. I much prefer the world of music than I prefer cinema. But I am married now into a Bollywood family. So for me, it comes my way. But my wife, luckily, she's more on the business side, not on the entertainment side. But I think the area of entertainment, whether it's music, whether it's films, whether it's Bollywood films or even it's Western films, I firmly believe even for a country like India, where we have such a big film industry, it's actually a big source of a soft power for India.
Okay, coming back to some questions related to politics, from MP to now becoming a minister, how has the journey been? How do you see this whole journey? Especially now that youth leadership is being talked about, you're seeing as a younger minister in the cabinet, so a lot of responsibility and accountability on your shoulders.
Well, I think it's a good thing to put younger people in different ministries, in important ministries. I consider myself very fortunate that I'm in two, I believe, very exciting ministries, and I'm very passionate about both of them. I think telecom and IT, of course, is a ministry which any young person would be excited about because every young person uses a mobile phone, every young person surfs on the internet. But shipping, which someone would say is typically an infrastructure ministry, shipping and ports, I personally find it very exciting. And I find it exciting because I come from Mumbai, which is the hub of the shipping industry in India. I personally enjoy the coast. So I'm trying to apply the experiences I've had around the world and bring some of those opportunities to India.
Why I asked you that is because now after Rahul Gandhi becoming the vice president in the party, as I said, a lot of responsibility and accountability now on your shoulders, more and more. And second, do you think that you have veteran leaders in your party that someday, and as the years go by, they'll have to give you the baton? How difficult do you think is the road ahead?
Well, I think that a generation and a transitional shift has already begun in my party. It to some extent has even begun in government. I mean, the fact that there are younger ministers along with senior experienced ministers, including the Prime Minister, that on its own tells you that we as a, not just as the Congress party or the UPA government, but we as a country can't really ignore that we need a right mix of experience and youth. So I think the future is very bright for young people in the sense that there is a strong youthful leadership that exists in our country today, and I think in the coming years to come we'll see them, the younger leaders, it may not necessarily be someone like me, but you'll see a lot more younger leaders playing much more active roles, not just in the central government, but in state governments, in rural areas, in local bodies. Because in the end, we are a country of young people. And as much as I have always believed that you can't really divide politics and politicians based on age, but I don't blame a young person who says, I also want to see greater representation of younger people. But I firmly believe you need a right mix of the two. Like any a responsible organization with a responsible duty to a nation, whether it's a company or whether it's a media channel or whether it's a government of India, which has huge responsibilities to the people of India, you need to have a right mix. So you need young people in the system, but you need young people to be mentored by somebody who's got experience so that they can be ready for when the transition happens.
How do you see the future of the nation? And they say that Rahul Gandhi also very soon will see him leading the nation.
Well, I think he's made his stand clear on different instances in terms of what he wants to do. For me, I would say that his real focus is improving the organization, that's our party. And I think where he comes from is an important place, because in my own personal capacity, when I've traveled around the country, from the north, south, east or west, across religious groups, across languages, across cultures, the party I belong to has a strong tradition in India and a strong grassroots base in the entire part of the country. For various reasons, we may not have encouraged those local leaders to come up, and I think he's very passionate about that. So I'm glad that his heart is in that place, and I think he's passionate enough to bring about some positive changes.
Coming back to some of the work that your ministry is doing right now, Spectrum, how do you see the past now getting a new future?
Well, we are really, in the ministry, we are actually following a court order after whatever happened in the past. But I think given what happened, and things are yet to be concluded in the courts, so it's not really appropriate for me to comment on too many of those things. But I think there's a lot more clarity in this sector. For a long time, as the sector began to evolve, especially the wireless space, from the mid-90s, for almost 20 years that we've had telecommunications and teledensity in the wireless area, policies have changed, and across governments and across ministers also. And to be fair, they've changed because the demographics, the objective of different governments and different ministries was very different from time to time. So today the ministry's focus is, we do want to improve teledensity, but we also want to ensure that the government monetizes that spectrum efficiently. A few years ago it was, we want to only improve teledensity in our country, and to be fair, that policy has worked. But I think from an industry point of view, if there's somebody out there who's an entrepreneur in this space, who wants to set up a mobile company, who wants to set up a VAS company, wants to create applications for mobiles, the future is very bright. Because as I said, we are now even going into rural areas where the private sector doesn't find interesting commercially. And we are spending a lot of taxpayers' money, bringing all our public sector companies together. And in about 2.5 lakh panchayats in India, we will have connected them to a optical fiber, very high-speed internet backbone.
One very important question here, which is about health hazards caused by radiation, and you actually took it up in a big way. The parliamentary committee actually thought about it and very seriously. What is being done?
Well, there's radiation from two things. There's radiation from towers, and there's...
I'm talking about the cell tower.
Yeah, and there's radiation from handsets also. For both of them, we have, we've actually from 2008, we've followed global norms that are set by WHO, that almost 80% of the world follows. As recently as September 2012, just less than maybe 6 months ago, we actually made those norms 10 times more stringent for mobile towers. And we did that because although we've actually now, we have more stringent norms than what Europe has. We have more stringent norms than what the entire Asia has. We have more stringent norms than what some of the most developed telecom economies in the world like Japan and Korea have. We deliberately did that, not because we wanted to scuttle industry, but because we wanted to give a message to the people of India that as we are a country that has embraced wireless telephony like no other country before it, we want to ensure that people's health is paramount. First their health, then connectivity. That's been the mantra of our ministry. And simultaneous and alongside that, we are also conducting studies where there is only limited amount of research available globally. We are conducting our own India-centric studies to understand whether these truly are a health hazard, and if so, how much of a hazard they are.
So we are talking again to Milind Deora, and there are so many challenges that India faces in terms of poverty and education, and how IT plays a role there. We'll talk about that after a very short break that we are going to once again. You're watching The Quest on Rajya Sabha TV, and we are talking to Milind Deora. Tell us more about what the IT ministry is doing. There are overcharged mobile tariffs that telecom operators are charging. I mean, if you're looking at consumer-specific problems, how is it being solved here?
Well, I think one thing I've tried to do in this ministry is, and I think you've hit the bullseye in the sense that for a long time, especially given the controversy we had in the last few years, I wanted to re-energize the ministry's focus to the consumer. Because in the end, what the Ministry of Communications and IT is meant to do, whether it's the Department of Electronics and IT, whether it's the Department of Telecommunications, whether it's the Department of Posts, we are really here to empower the consumer in India, especially the average person, to make communication tools more affordable, more accessible. And we've undertaken a slew of measures which have actually, in the area of just wireless telephony, have given consumers a choice. One very good example of that is mobile number portability. We've given the customer the choice where if they are not satisfied with a service provider, they have the right to port out and retain the number and move to another subscriber. And we've done very well compared to what the rest of the world has done in MNP. If you remember a few years ago, you would get a lot of pesky SMSs on your phone. People asking you to buy land somewhere, to participate in something.
You're being harsh on those who
and we've come down to some extent on them, and we've prevented those pesky SMSs and unsolicited calls. So these are examples of measures where we've actually empowered the consumer. So in addition to making services more accessible, cheaper, we've also said that we will give you world-class services. In some areas, we'll even pioneer in innovating and giving you the services before they even implemented in other parts of the world.
As far as shipping is concerned, safety of sailors, I would come to that, is an important point, an area of concern. How do you really tackle that? And also cyber attacks.
Well, in the area of seafarers and sailors, the biggest concern really is one stretch of the Somalia coast, which you have Somalian pirates, where Indian sailors, because Indian sailers constitute quite a large percent of global sailors. A lot of Indian sailors work not only on Indian ships, but on even foreign flags.
Exactly.
And often when those foreign flags are sailing in those waters and they get abducted, it becomes a big problem, and we are responsible because
it's a very sensitive and complicated.
It's a very sensitive. So at best what we can do is we can work with local governments in the region to provide more security. There are international bodies like the IMO, which is the International Maritime Organization, that to some extent plays a role. But when a sailor does get abducted and a ship does get kidnapped by these pirates, the Ministry of Shipping, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Defence, and several other agencies in the Government of India all work cohesively to free those sailors. So it is an issue. It's not something that we can really do directly.
How your ministry is also working on fighting terror, because IT plays a very big role as far as all those plans to.
Well, we have again a lot of collaboration with different ministries that look after security, whether it's Ministry of Home, Ministry of Defence. We of course provide technological inputs, and we have a pretty holistic cyber plan to prevent cyber threats, because I do believe, and even foreign countries have said this, that the wars of the future will be cyber.
Women's safety is an area of major concern today. Is IT doing something in terms of providing any special helplines or any such plan that you have?
Well, the Department of Telecommunications is always available, and our public sector companies, BSNL, MTN, are always happy to help the Ministry of Home if they come with a specific proposal. But not something we in the ministry may be doing, but I believe that IT is a very important tool to actually ensure the safety of women. I think with different applications on the phones, there's a lot of innovative solutions that a woman can download on her phone, which can in some ways allow her to communicate an emergency service if she's being harassed. Just like I believe IT is a very important tool to even curb corruption. It's a
Exactly.
very important tool to even improve governance. And we have a huge national e-governance plan which will actually eliminate the bureaucratic layer that to some level you can say causes the everyday corruption that the common man has to go through.
My final question, Milind Deora after 10 years.
A lot grayer and hopefully having some more time to do the other things that I love, like music.
Thank you so much. So this was Milind Deora for you, a politician with a vision and somebody who wants to build a better India. Thanks for watching The Quest on Rajya Sabha TV. We'll be back to you with a new guest again on this show. Thank you so much. Goodbye.